OSR October, episode 14, or I think it's 14, I'm in the car today. Be choosy with your systems. The R in OSR stands for Renaissance. Other people who tell you other R's are wrong. That's their R. R is for wrong. The reason I say that, and the reason I'm so passionate about it, is because Renaissance is an accurate term to describe what happened between, say, the mid-2000s and the mid-20-teens when I showed up. Under the OGL, we had a boom, an explosion of TSR-compatible content. The spirit of the original game, which had been lost in the WotC editions, especially after 4th edition came out, and humorously, D&D lost market share as the leader among fantasy adventure games. The absence of that spirit, the absence of that adventure, that paved the way for an absolute explosion in creativity. Crowdfunding made creators who would never have been able to publish their material before able to publish their material. Drive-through and other PDF and Lulu and print on demand, they made these products available. They allowed you to share material like never before, and in some cases make a business out of it. Now, I have opinions on whether or not OSR material should be free or paid. I won't go into that here. Then you had social networks. You have Discords popping up. You had G+ as the central hub. You had the blogosphere bouncing back and forth. You had communication that you never had before. In the days before the OGL, if you had those kind of communities, they could get a cease and desist notice. And whether that cease and desist notice was applicable or not, whether it was a valid or not, it didn't matter. It was spooky. You had a lot of people who took stuff down because they were too small to fight the fight that they shouldn't have had to. I forget the legal term for that, but that kind of bullying that was gone, and it was a way for the community to blossom and to spread like never before. I came into this hobby via wargaming. And as such, I have certain expectations and enjoyments out of the hobby that may not be the same as someone who came into it from a roleplay exclusive perspective. Now, there's a lot of talk in OSR circles about how wargaming was the root of the game, in that in the Great Lakes region, because there were so much wargame culture that was surrounding the people who got into the game, a lot of stuff went without saying. But then when it made its way to other places, to the West Coast in particular, there was not that same culture, and so there were different assumptions. Now, that was in the 70s, but didn't I say the other day that my game experience started in the 90s? It did, and today there are people coming into the hobby from a wargaming background. There are people who will enjoy our hobby for the same reasons that I enjoy it, because of the way that they play games. There are also people who are going to be coming into it for theater hour. More power to them. I don't know if the OSR is right for you, but more power to you. I want you to play the game that works for your table. And that's a really long way to say, pick a game that suits your table. I've had a couple call-ins expressing a similar concern, and that is, Taylor, you're talking about style, you're talking about experience. If you're not talking about system, then I can do all of the stuff in this primer with Pathfinder. I can do all of the stuff that's in this primer with GURPS. Is GURPS OSR? And I'm having a big call-in episode at the end of the month. I'm planning to play all those calls at the end of the month, so look forward to that in a couple days. But you have to consider the context of the primer. The old school primer that I've been reading through this past month, it's from 2008. It's from 2009. It is a very early document as part of this movement. And so if the history of D&D can trace from being a wargamer subculture in the Great Lakes and then expanding nationwide by the end of the decade, so also the OSR can be described as a subculture within gaming that exploded and eventually made its way all the way to the ends of the earth. One of the byproducts of that explosion, you have a lot of people who are coming into the OSR new, and they're coming into it without the history. When the primer was written, Osric, BFRPG, Labyrinth Lord, that was it. You either had your old AD&D books, or you had your BX set from 1982 Christmas, or you had one of these 3 ret clones that were really close to the original material. The underlying assumption for this primer is that you're working with Swords and Wizardry, you're working with Osric, you're working with your TSR editions, because at the time it was written, those other games, the Knaves, the Maze Rats, the other indie games that don't share the mechanical fidelity to the TSR games, they didn't exist yet. And so this confusion of system wasn't a thing. The confusion of system is a result of people who are new to the movement, who haven't been exposed to TSR, who may not even have been born when TSR owned the rights to the game. They're coming into the movement. They enjoy the style of play. They enjoy the spirit of the game that's embodied by the OSR, and they're more than welcome. I love that I'm seeing people who are younger than some of my t-shirts playing in some of my games. That's awesome. I'm going off on a tangent. The important part here is, yes, you can hit all of the spirit elements with a non-OSR game, but OSR means more than that. What is the benefit of mechanical compatibility? When I first got disenfranchised with the WotC brand of D&D, I moved off into what I jokingly refer to as my wayward youth. I made a skill-based game. It kind of made some iterations as a dice pool. It made some iterations as a target number, and we had a lot of fun with that game, and we played it for a couple years, truthfully, before I went back to published systems. But one of the things that happened when I wrote that skill-based game, I had to go in and write a bestiary for it. I had to go in and write generators for it. How was I going to do the setup? How was I going to do the monsters? Because that's a thing. You can't run an adventure game without adventures, obviously. And all of that has to come from somewhere. Now, fast forward to the mid-20-teens when I found the OSR. I can grab the 1E monster manual and I can run those monsters in BX. I can grab the Fiend Folio and I can run those monsters in Swords and Wizardry. That compatibility means that even if there's some tweaking necessary, and I'm really generous about my compatibility. Like you've heard me talk a little bit about DCC. I've played DCC and enjoy it. I consider it OSR adjacent, but when I ran that game, I bolted on all of the missing pieces, our exploration procedures, the hex crawling stuff, the dungeoneering turns, some of this encumbrance. I tacked all of that on from BX because that's what I had at the time and what I was familiar with, and it worked. I took the DCC that I was given, I bolted on the stuff that I thought would make it a complete game, and I was able to run a campaign in it that lasted over a year. The point being, I was able to do that because I was able to lean on history. I was able to lean on a tremendous wealth of material that had been produced over the last 50 years. You can grab Monsters and Treasure, the second book of the original LBB set, and you can take those elements and you can incorporate them into AD&D. You can incorporate them into second edition. You can incorporate them into BX or BECMI or Rule Cyclopedia. You can incorporate them into AX. Even though there are minor differences, the core compatibility means that, and the core simplicity. Now, I say simplicity, not all OSR systems are simple. That's okay. But the core compatibility, the core emphasis on, do they need stats? Monsters only need stats when the stats come up. And so that kind of interplay between compatible editions means that I can pull stuff from anything TSR and stuff it into this compatible edition. But Taylor, aren't you working on that Weapons, Whips, and Wizardry game that's supposed to be classless OSR? Yes, I am. And I'm really excited about it, and I'm going to try to take some time. I'm going on vacation later this month, and I'm going to try to take some time to finish that up, or at least put it into a state where I want to throw it to my players and say, hey, let's play this for a bit and see. But that's still compatible. The core stats are the same. The experience levels have been intentionally tailored to work with the OD&D experience levels, which are close enough to work with other games. So you can take B2, Keep on the Borderlands, and you can run that in Weapons, Wits, and Wizardry with 0 changes. There will be a little bit of difference in how it plays because of the chainmail aspect of it, because 2d6 versus d20, there are rules for an alternative where you roll d20s, but the bonuses will be a little different, so that the experiences will be a little different, but at the core, you can run it no problem. Because you have all of that history, all of that material, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Weapons, Wits, and Wizardry is, compared to my skill-based game, it was called Barbute, if I remember correctly. I think I have an ancient copy lying around here somewhere, but I'll put it up there one day so we can all chuckle at it. The important part, Barbute, I put a load of work into that to try to replicate all of the wealth of material that you need to run a campaign. With Weapons, Wits, and Wizardry, I don't have to. I'm already running pieces of it. I'm already playtesting pieces of it because I can lean on 40 years of history. So, pick a game that suits your table. If you enjoy those kind of dungeon crawlers, pick a dungeon crawler. If you enjoy progressing from Brigand to Adventurer to Warband to Baron, pick a game that mechanically reinforces those themes. So, can you conform to the spirit of the old school primer without an OSR game? Yes, you can. However, I hope I've conveyed in this sort of rambling ramble, if you pick a game that the core loop, the core principles, reinforce the elements of the game, gold for XP, you naturally want to delve dungeons and get gold. So there's a mechanical reinforcement for that aspect of tone. If you run games that reinforce the tone and maintain that compatibility, you have twofold: a wealth of material to steal from, and you don't have to worry about setting the tone because the game already does. That ramble didn't go exactly where I thought it was going to go, but hopefully folks find it useful. Hopefully folks can pick up on the excitement I have for the hobby, for the people coming into the hobby, and for the history the hobby can offer, and that way that that history can build, the way that that history can explode and can make the future a more fantastic place than the past. Anyway, thanks for listening. Happy Halloween. OSR October, Day 15. Pick your people. The last thing that I would leave you with this OSR October, apart from call and answer on the call-in episode I promised, pick your people. I've made a couple statements throughout the course of the month about doing what's right for your table, doing what's right for your experience, and catering to what you want the game to be. At the end of the day, all of that centers around the table. And when I say table, I don't mean the hardwood between you and your players. I mean you and your players. The single most destructive thing that can happen at an RPG campaign is a mismatch of expectations to produce a subpar experience. Online games, it's easy to ghost out. I've had people ghost on me. I shamefully have ghosted on people. But in person, it's a little more challenging. And a lot of folks are playing in person. The moral of the story, though, why does ghosting happen? Why do people drop out of games? Sometimes life comes up. I've dropped out of games because life came up. I dropped out of gaming entirely for an entire year because life came up. But more commonly, you don't hear stories about people ghosting on the game chat and then in the out of character section posting a picture of a baby. You see people drop off and then frustrated DMs worrying about what went wrong. So as a player, it's awesome if you communicate what went wrong. If this is just not your thing, if this is just not what you are looking for in a game, tell the group, because that may be solvable. Maybe the experience you're looking for is a one step away from what they were willing to run. Alternatively, if it's irreconcilable, that's cool. Let the referee know, because that way they won't worry about whether or not they scared you off or if something bad happened to you. I remember I lost a player once. We just flat out didn't know what happened to him. We thought he might have been in a car accident. He stopped showing up to the home game. He stopped showing up to the comic shop. He stopped everything. Like, didn't reply to text, didn't reply to nothing. And turns out he had gotten promoted at his workplace and gotten a girlfriend at the same time. So don't know why he couldn't reply to our text messages anymore. I guess he was busy. But we're not going to worry about him. Corey, if you're out there, I still love you. As the referee, you want to think about what kind of game you want to run, and you want to have players who have that same vision. Cultivate a community that shares your appendix in. Do you like 1982 Conan the Barbarian? Tell the players to watch 1982 Conan the Barbarian before coming to the character gen. Do you like Hawk the Slayer? Have your players watch Hawk the Slayer. It will inform them of the tone, and it will bring them into the fold. And it will let them know this is what you're expecting. So if you come in with a battle in mind, a siege in mind, and a grand war game campaign, but then your players have never used hirelings before, that's going to be foreign to them, and you may end up getting ghosted. You may end up having people drop and being that frustrated guy on the forum. So not every table is for every player, and that's okay. Sometimes you can cheat on your home group with a different group, and no one's going to fault you for it, because it's all about finding shared ground, finding common interests. For the most part, it's more important that you're gaming with people you like, you're gaming with people you respect, and you're gaming with people who produce the same experiences through shared expectations over what the game is supposed to be. Who knows? At one point, maybe those players will come to the realization that people is more important than play, and so you'll be able to bounce around and do different things, have different themes, different tones, spin off one-shots, try other games with the same group of people and have a similar kind of feedback. Alternatively, you may end up stuck with somebody like me who only gets to play every other week these days at best, and so he's going to try to focus on something he likes. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. You have to keep heart. You have to keep in mind your limitations, you have to keep in mind your expectations, and you have to align those with the people, because at the end of the day, the people are what's important. If you have that shared understanding, if you're going for the same game, if you're going for the same tone, that produces immersion, that produces the drive and the engagement, and that produces a better experience. And it's better for you. If you have a friend that you've played with but who just doesn't enjoy the same thing that you're trying to go for, it's better for you to game outside of that relationship and then just come together at lunch one day and talk up the experience. Because a lot of folks enjoy those kind of stories. I know I enjoy hearing people telling me stories about creative things that happened in their game. Not the, I rolled a nat 20 and punched a volcano. I don't like that story. That's stupid. But if you do something cool, if you have a magic item that didn't work the way you thought it was, if you innovated, if you did something fun, if you fought a battle that you didn't think you were going to win, but the tides turned, I love hearing about that kind of stuff. I'm tempted to start my actual plays, editing them and putting them into Anchor format so that folks can call in. Or should have done that last year, apparently. Just to see if I can harvest some of those cool ideas. Because at the end of the day, those kind of experiences, the memorable ones, those are the kind of experiences that you can steal from and build off of. And I need to do more episodes. When does next October roll around? Either way, between now and then, thank you for listening, and delve on.
The Clear Square Ring Mail Podcast is an independently owned and operated product released for educational and informative purposes under the Totally Steal This license, which is kind of like Creative Commons, except for licensing. Segments recorded within a vehicle are recorded using a Bluetooth hands-free device in conjunction with local vehicular safety legislation. Theme music for the Clear Square Ring Mail Podcast is Gold Coffee by Michael Vermeer C., retrieved from Mixkit.co and used under the Mixkit royalty-free music license. Sound effects used in the Clear Square Ring Mail Podcast are also retrieved from Mixkit.co and used in accordance with the Mixkit free sound effects license. Clear Square Ring Mail does not ascribe to nor endorse views or opinions expressed by call-ins, guests, or even the host, unless you think they're awesome, and thus does not assume any liability regarding the consumption or distribution of this podcast. By listening to the Clear Square Ring Mail Podcast, you agree to these provided terms. Parties with questions regarding these terms, conditions, or releases are encouraged to reach out to Clear Square Ring Mail at the prescribed methods provided on the Clear Square Ring Mail blog. Parties dissatisfied with these terms, conditions, or releases are encouraged to go suck an egg.